The gravel crunched under the tires of the massive, ivory-colored SUV as it pulled up to the front gate of my property. I was sitting on my porch, cleaning a piece of leather harness when the woman stepped out. She was dressed in a pristine white linen jumpsuit that looked like it had never seen a speck of dust, a bold choice for the Montana backcountry. "Can I help you?" I called out, not standing up. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she adjusted her oversized sunglasses and scanned my rolling pastures, the weathered red barn, and the jagged peaks of the Rockies that framed the horizon. Finally, she marched toward the porch. "I'm Karen Vance," she announced, as if the name should trigger a standing ovation. "I'm the head of the Zen and Harmony Collective. We've selected your land for our annual solstice retreat." I paused, my rag mid-swipe. "Selected? I think you've got the wrong address, Karen. This isn't a campground, this is a working cattle ranch." She let out a high-pitched, practiced laugh. "Oh, I know, but the energy here is simply divine. It's a nexus point. We did a digital scan of the ley lines. This is where the universe wants us to be." "The universe should have checked with the owner first," I said, finally standing up. My knees creaked, a reminder of 60 years of hard labor. "The answer is no, this land is private and I've got a herd to manage." Karen's smile didn't flicker, but her eyes turned cold. "You don't understand. This is a non-profit spiritual gathering. We've already sold 500 tickets. People are flying in from London, Tokyo, and San Francisco. It's bigger than your little no, Mr. Miller, Arthur Miller, and 500 people is a riot, not a retreat. Get off my property." She didn't leave. She pulled out a smartphone and tapped the screen. "I've already filed for a temporary cultural gathering permit with the county. Since you haven't used this specific parcel for grazing in 3 months, it qualifies under the new Shared Green Space Ordinance. You'll receive a nominal fee in the mail. We arrive Friday." She turned on her heel and strutted back to her SUV. I stood there, stunned. Shared green space? This was Montana, not a suburban park, but Karen had clearly done her homework or hired a lawyer who had. The invasion. Friday morning arrived with the subtlety of a localized earthquake. A fleet of rental vans, converted school buses, and high-end SUVs began rolling through my gate. They didn't even stop at the house. They drove straight to the High Meadow, a beautiful, secluded 50-acre stretch of grass that I had been letting rest for the season. By noon, the meadow was a sea of organic cotton tents, portable yurts, and healing crystals the size of watermelons. I rode my horse, Jasper, down to the meadow to find Karen. She was standing on a makeshift stage, directing a crew of young men who were setting up a massive sound system. "Karen, this is enough," I shouted over the hum of a generator. "You've got 500 people trespassing on a working ranch. There's no sanitation, no security, and you're blocking the access road to my water tanks." "Arthur, darling, breathe," she said, holding up a palm. "We have composting toilets coming, and as for the road, we need it for the kombucha delivery trucks. Just use the back trail." "The back trail is a mile out of the way and half washed out," I growled. "You're endangering my livelihood. Move these people or I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead," she smirked. "Sheriff Miller is your nephew, isn't he? I've already filed a preemptive harassment claim against you. If he shows up to shut down a peaceful spiritual gathering without a court order, it'll be on the front page of every paper in the state. We're staying for the weekend. Namaste." I looked around. People were barefoot, wandering into the tall grass where rattlesnakes liked to sunbathe. They were lighting sacred fires in the middle of a dry June. They were treated my home like a playground. I went back to the house and called my nephew, Silas. "Uncle Art, I'm sorry," Silas said, his voice sounding tired over the radio. "She's got those permits and she's got a team of lawyers on speed dial. Unless they commit a felony, my hands are tied until Monday when I can get a judge to review the land use bypass. I can't just drag 500 people out of there in handcuffs." "So they can just take my land?" I asked, my blood boiling. "For 48 hours, technically," she found a loophole. "Just stay inside, Art, don't do anything crazy." I hung up. I looked out the window at the high meadow. The sun was setting and the Zen and Harmony Collective was starting a drum circle. The thud-thud-thud of the bass echoed off the canyon walls. It was driving my dogs crazy and I knew it was stressing the livestock in the lower pasture. I wasn't going to wait for a judge. I was a rancher. And in this part of the country, we have our own way of managing land use disputes. The strategy. I spent the evening in my barn sipping a black coffee and listening to the distant chanting. They were having a great awakening ceremony at midnight. I thought about my bulls. In the North Paddock, I had 10 of the finest, orneriest black Angus bulls in the county. These weren't pets. They were 1,500 pounds of muscle, testosterone, and bad attitude. Usually I kept them far away from the public because they didn't like strangers, they didn't like noise, and they particularly hated the color neon orange, which, coincidentally, was the color of the Zen Collective's main event tent. I checked the wind. It was blowing straight from the North Paddock toward the high meadow. Jasper, I whispered to my horse as I saddled him at 11:00 p.m. We're going to give them a real spiritual experience. I rode out to the North Paddock. The bulls were restless. The thumping bass from the meadow was vibrating the ground, and they were already pawing at the dirt, their nostrils flaring. They knew something wasn't right in their territory. I didn't need to stampede them, I just needed to relocate them. I opened the gate connecting the North Paddock to the high meadow trail. I didn't use a whip or a shout. I simply cracked a bag of sweet grain and led the way. The bulls followed, a dark, heavy mass of shadow moving through the moonlight. As we reached the crest of the hill overlooking the campsite, the sight was something to behold. The Zen Collective had lit hundreds of torches. There were people in white robes dancing in circles. Karen was center stage, holding a microphone, screaming about becoming one with the earth. Well, I whispered, time to meet the neighbors. The release. I dropped the grain trail leading directly into the center of the camp, specifically aimed at the VIP catering tent, which was filled with organic fruit and expensive salads. Then, I backed Jasper into the shadows of the treeline and watched. The first bull, a massive beast we called Tank, caught the scent of the clover and grain. He didn't run, he marched. He entered the perimeter of the camp just as the music reached a crescendo. A young woman with blue hair and a tambourine was the first to notice. She stopped dancing and stared. "Oh my God," she whispered, "is that a spirit animal?" Tank didn't look like a spirit, he looked like a freight train with horns. He let out a low, guttural bellow that rattled the windows of the nearby vans. Then came the other 9. They moved into the camp with a singular focus: food. But bulls are territorial, and 500 people screaming and waving glow sticks is the opposite of a calming vibe. The Great Awakening turned into the Great Panic in approximately 6 seconds. "Everyone stay calm," Karen's voice shrieked over the PA system. "They sense your energy, Project Love, Project Peace." Tank responded to her love by putting his head down and charging the catering table. He flipped a $300 spread of kale salad and artisanal cheeses into the air like confetti. Another bull, Buster, decided the giant neon orange tent looked like a personal challenge. He put his shoulder into the support pole and the entire Harmony Hall collapsed in a heap of fabric and tangled yoga mats. People were scattering in every direction. There was no zen left. It was a chaotic scramble for the safety of the SUVs and school buses. "Get them out of here," Karen screamed, seeing me on my horse at the edge of the woods. "Arthur, call your cows, they're destroying the equipment." I trotted Jasper down into the light of the dying fires. I pulled a blade of grass and tucked it into the corner of my mouth. "I tried to tell you, Karen," I shouted over the sound of a bull systematically dismantling a yurt. "This is a working ranch. The bulls aren't part of your permit. They've been grazing this meadow for 10 years. Technically, you're in their shared green space." "I'll sue you," she yelled, climbing onto the roof of her SUV as Tank began licking the salt off her hubcaps. "This is animal endangerment. This is assault." "Assault? They're just looking for a snack," I said. "But I should warn you, Angus bulls get real cranky around midnight, and it looks like they've decided your Zen stage is a scratching post." As if on cue, a bull named Diesel began rubbing his massive neck against the stage pilings. The wood groaned. The speakers fell over with a screech of feedback. The 500 seekers of harmony weren't seeking harmony anymore. They were seeking the exit. A line of cars began peeling out, tires spinning in the mud as people abandoned their tents and expensive crystals to escape the spirit animals. The aftermath. By sunrise, the high meadow looked like a battlefield covered in glitter and organic cotton. The Zen and Harmony Collective was gone, leaving behind a trail of abandoned gear and one very muddy, very angry Karen Vance. She was the last to leave. She stood by her SUV looking at the wreckage of her Nexus Point. You ruined it, she hissed, her jumpsuit now stained with manure and dirt. We had a vision, we had a movement. You had a trespass, I corrected. Now I've got work to do, my bulls need their breakfast and you've left a lot of trash in their dining room. I'd suggest you leave before I decide to move the manure spreader through here. She jumped into her car and sped away, her tires kicking up a final cloud of dust. About an hour later, Silas pulled up in his patrol car. He looked out over the meadow, saw my 10 bulls peacefully napping in the shade of a collapsed orange tent and started to laugh. I heard there was a disturbance, Silas said, leaning against his car. Just some local wildlife reclaiming their habitat, I said, patting Tank on the flank. You know she's going to complain to the county board, Silas warned. Let her, I shrugged. I've got 500 witnesses who will testify that they entered a fenced enclosure filled with livestock. My lawyer says that's called assumption of risk. Besides, I think the Zen Collective has moved on. I heard they're looking at a Nexus Point in North Dakota. Hopefully that guy has buffalo. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up. It took a while, but the land has a way of healing itself. The grass would grow back. The smell of incense would fade, replaced by the honest scent of pine and cattle. I sat on my porch that evening, the silence finally restored. The mountains were purple in the twilight and the only sound was the wind through the trees. No drums, no chanting, no Karen. The land wasn't meant to be shared by people who didn't respect it. It was meant to be worked, loved, and sometimes protected by a few tons of stubborn beef. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. It was the most peaceful the ranch had felt in years.